Now we will discuss Delheim's communicative competence. Delheim defined communicative competence not only as an inherent grammatical competence, but also as the ability to use grammatical competence in variety of communicative situations. So we see that it is not only the knowledge or understanding of the grammatical rules of the language which Delheim emphasizes. According to him, communicative competence deals with the overall communication that takes place in any context or situation. Contrary to Chomsky's concept of linguistic competence, it is competence of language use appropriate, that's the key word here, to the other participants of the communicative interaction and appropriate to the given social context and situation. So when we discussed Chomsky's linguistic competence, we saw that he only emphasized the understanding or the acquisition of linguistic data or the grammatical rules. But Heim says that the communicative competency does not only mean, which means that it does take into account the linguistic understanding or linguistic knowledge of any language, but as well as the appropriacy of using that data in any given situation. So that means involving other participants, which may be your colleagues or a situation or any external factors that are there in any social or cultural context. So let's see, in this image we have 3 boxes leading to communicative competence. The first says knowledge of underlying grammatical principles. So that is basically the linguistic knowledge. Then knowledge of how to combine utterances and communicative functions with respect to discourse principles. Now that is not only the understanding but combining or creating the utterances in terms of your knowledge of the situation in which they are going to be used, and the discourse in terms of how the data will be interpreted, how that data will be used for the communication purposes. And the third is knowledge of how to use language in a social context in order to fulfill communicative function. So here you have the creating or generating of that information and knowing how to use that. And here you are actually using it to fulfill the communicative function. These two were already present in the previous models, but this aspect, which is to do with the communicative aspect of any model or communicative competence in social context, is added here. So according to Himes, all these 3 areas constitute communicative competence. It also refers to learners' ability to relate what is learned in the classroom to the outside world. So basically preparing a learner for the outside world. That's the focus of this particular approach or model. That in the classroom, the linguistic input is given or the knowledge is provided to the learner to equip the learner to use that language input effectively for communicative purposes outside the classroom. From this perspective, Heim described the competent language user as the one who knows when and where and how to use language appropriately. So for Heim, if you have given the learner with the input, the competent learner is the one who knows the language, who knows what, where and how that language is to be used appropriately, rather than merely knowing how to produce accurate grammatical structure. So communicative competence was in reaction to Chomsky's linguistic competency. Now, here it's not just being passive and absorbing the input, knowing that how to construct a grammatically correct sentence. That does not contribute into making a learner competent. A competent learner is the one who knows the knowledge and at the same time knows where and how that knowledge is to be used appropriately. So now that we have seen that Heim's communicative competence is in reaction to the linguistic competence, so let's see where they both, Chomsky and Heim's, differ in terms of their models of competence. Now, according to Chomsky, the primary concern of linguistic theory is with an ideal speaker-hearer in a completely homogeneous speech community who knows its language perfectly, as in unaffected by such grammatically irrelevant conditions as memory limitation, distraction, shifts of attention, and interests, errors in applying his knowledge. So this is a perfect place for an ideal hearer situation where the linguistic theory is only concerned with ideal speaker-hearer who do not have any of these deficiencies. Now, according to Himes, from this standpoint of the children, we seek to understand and help. Such a statement may seem almost a declaration of irrelevance. So in terms of those who have mental impairment, in terms of those who have mental deficiencies, this point becomes irrelevant, according to Himes. Chomsky's linguistic competence does not include social aspect of language, whereas communicative competence is seen as an aspect of what form another angle may be called the ethnography of symbolic form. Ethnography, we all know, there's the study of people, their culture, their norms, and the study of variety of genres, narration, dance, drama, song, instrumental music, or in fact everything that constitute a society, and in terms of which the relative importance and meaning of speech and language must be assessed. So it says that it is the society in which the relevant language needs to be practiced and should be assessed in terms of fulfilling a communicative function. So communicative competence highlights the ability of language use as part of competence. In speaking of competence, it is especially important not to separate cognitive form from the emotional and willingness factors. Chomsky did not intend to develop linguistic competence for educational purposes, but for Himes, that is very important, that basis should be there to form pedagogical practices based on cognition as well as the use of language. They refer to, linguistic competence refer to the acquisition of language within a specific time, and then there is no change afterwards. But communicative competence is an ongoing process, and yes, it can be changed. It's not that it just stops there after certain competences is achieved. To conclude, Himes proposed the theory of communicative competence in reaction to Chomsky's linguistic competence. The former concerns with learners' grammatical knowledge as well as social knowledge of a language, and later deals with system of linguistic knowledge possessed by native speakers of unknown language.